The sheriff's cruiser blocked my driveway at 6 in the morning, lights spinning red and blue across my barn. Axel Reyes, you're being cited for illegal road use, the deputy said, holding a folded HOA complaint like a weapon. Illegal. On a public road my family had used for 40 years. I almost laughed. Except nothing about this was funny. My name is Axel Reyes, and 3 months ago, a woman named Karen Whitfield decided my tractor didn't belong on her street. I run Reyes Family Farm. 40 acres on the edge of Maple Hollow Estates, a subdivision that swallowed our old county road. When the developer sold the last lots, nobody told us the HOA would claim jurisdiction over the gravel lane my grandfather built. Karen Whitfield became board president 2 years ago, and residents still whisper her name like it might summon a lawsuit. She wore blazers to community picnics and carried a laminated copy of the covenants everywhere, quoting rules like scripture. At first, the complaints were small. My tractor tires tracked dirt onto her precious asphalt, she said, and demanded I stop. I explained the road was county maintained, not HOA property, but Karen didn't deal in facts. She dealt in control. Within a week, a certified letter arrived, a $500 fine for unauthorized commercial vehicle traffic on residential streets. My daughter, Mia, 12 years old, watched me read it at the kitchen table and asked why the neighbors hated us. They didn't. Not most of them. But Karen had a way of turning quiet HOA meetings into her personal courtroom. I paid the first fine, thinking it would end there. It never ends there with people like her. It only starts. 2 weeks later, a second letter came, then a third. Each fine higher. Each violation more absurd than the last. Fines for a mailbox flag. For a garden hose left coiled wrong. For grass a half-inch over her arbitrary limit. I started keeping every letter in a manila folder. A habit, not yet a plan. That would come later. At the next HOA meeting, I stood up and asked to see the covenant clause banning farm vehicles on the road. Karen smiled thinly and said the board reserved discretionary authority, a phrase with no page number. No citación. Nothing real. Other residents shifted in their seats. Nobody backed me up. Nobody wanted to be her next target. Old Mr. Danby leaned over afterward and whispered, "She did this to the Coopers too." They moved out crying. That night I told my wife, "Rosa, we might need a lawyer." She said we might need more than that. Rosa runs the farm stand and knows every regular customer by name. She said, "Karen doesn't know who she's messing with." I didn't feel brave. I felt tired and a little afraid of what a woman with a gavel-shaped ego might do next. But I started filming every interaction. Every letter. Every conversation. Every absurd rule. I documented it all. Quietly. Patiently. A month in, Karen sent someone to photograph my property line at dawn, claiming my fence violated setback rules. The fence had stood there since 1987, older than the HOA itself, older than the pavement she loved so much. I called the county assessor's office and got the original property survey. My fence was 2 feet inside my own land. When I brought the survey to the next meeting, Karen barely glanced at it. "The board will review," she said, and moved on. Reviewing meant nothing. It meant stalling until I got frustrated enough to quit, or broke enough to comply. Then came the notice that changed everything: a total ban on agricultural equipment using any road inside Maple Hollow. That included the only road connecting my farm to the highway. Karen had effectively sealed off my property. I stood in my kitchen holding that letter, hands shaking, not from fear anymore, but from something colder, fury. "She can't do that," Rosa said. "That's a public road. The county owns it, not her little board." I called the county roads department the next morning, and the woman on the phone confirmed what I already suspected. Maple Hollow Lane was county maintained, deeded to the public in 1994. The HOA had zero legal authority over it. Karen was bluffing, wielding fake power like a loaded gun she never intended to check for bullets. But bluffs still hurt when the person aiming them controls fines, liens, and the goodwill of your neighbors. I requested the deed records in writing, formally, so there'd be a paper trail no one could later deny. 2 days later, my tractor was towed off my own driveway at 5 a.m., under a bogus abandoned vehicle claim. The tow company said the HOA had authorized it, citing a violation number that Conveniently, didn't exist in any file. That was the moment I stopped hoping this would blow over. That was the moment I started building a case. I hired an attorney named Priya Chandran, a sharp woman who specialized in HOA fraud and homeowner rights. She read my folder cover to cover and said one sentence I'll never forget: Karen just gave us a paper trail of theft. Theft. Because towing a vehicle under a fabricated violation on non-HOA property was conversion, a civil and potentially criminal act. Priya said we needed patience. Karen would keep making mistakes. People drunk on power always overreach eventually. So we waited and watched and let Karen dig her own hole, one illegal notice at a time. Meanwhile, my farm stand sales dropped. Rumors spread that I was the difficult farmer suing the whole neighborhood. Some of that was Karen's doing. She'd hinted at board meetings that I was unstable and litigious. It stung more than the fines. My family had fed this town's kids at the farmer's market for a decade. Mia came home crying because a classmate's mom said her daddy was the guy causing trouble in Maple Hollow. That night, sitting on the porch, he almost gav up. Almost paid every fine. Sold the disputed acres. Walked away. Rosa found me out there and said quietly, if we quit now, she wins forever and so does every Karen after her. That sentence became my compass for the next 4 months. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. The next morning I drove to the county recorder's office and pulled every document tied to Maple Hollow's HOA formation. Buried in a filing cabinet was something strange. The HOA's original bylaws had never been properly ratified by residents. A clerical footnote? Easy to miss. But Priya's eyes lit up when I handed it to her. If the bylaws were never legally adopted, she said, then half of what Karen enforces isn't legally enforceable at all. It wasn't the smoking gun yet, but it was the first crack in the wall Karen had built around herself. I photocopied everything, filed it safely and told no one outside our small circle. Karen still thought she was winning. Part 2 begins here. The conflict escalates and Karen's grip tightens before the first real fracture appears. Karen scheduled an emergency board meeting, claiming my pattern of non-compliance threatened property values across the entire subdivision. I showed up anyway, folder in hand, camera rolling in my shirt pocket, recording everything for the file. She tried to have me removed by a rent-a-cop she'd hired using HOA dues, which itself raised eyebrows. You can't remove a homeowner from a public meeting about his own property, Priya said, standing beside me now. Karen's face flickered, just for a second, a crack in the composed mask she wore like armor. She recovered fast, announcing a new fine, $2,000 for harassment of board officials during proceedings. The room went silent. Even her allies on the board exchanged uneasy glances at that number. One board member, a soft-spoken man named Harold, actually spoke up. Karen? That seems excessive for asking a question. Karen shut him down instantly. We vote as a board, Harold, not as individuals with opinions. That was twist number 1, Harold's discomfort. He wasn't loyal to Karen. He was afraid of her. After the meeting, Harold caught me in the parking lot, glancing over his shoulder like Karen might be watching. She threatened to expose my HOA fee arrears if I voted against her, he whispered. I'm 2 months behind. I asked if he'd say that on record. He hesitated, then said, not yet. But maybe soon. That was the second thread of the case. Karen wasn't just enforcing rules. She was blackmailing her own board. I told Priya and she said this changed everything. Coercion of board members could mean fraud. Maybe extortion charges. We needed more than Harold's whisper. We needed documents, dates, dollar amounts, something that would hold up in court. Meanwhile, Karen doubled down publicly, posting on the neighborhood app that I was endangering children with heavy machinery. My tractor topped out at 8 miles per hour. It had never come near a child. The lie stung anyway. Neighbors I'd known for years started avoiding eye contact at the mailbox. Karen's narrative was working. But not on everyone. An elderly widow named Doris Feldman knocked on my door with a plate of cookies and a warning. I've lived here since before that woman was born, Doris said. She did this to the Alvarez family too. Ran them right out. Doris had records, old newsletters, old emails, proving Karen's pattern stretched back 6 years. 3 different HOAs. Twist number 2, Karen wasn't a first-time tyrant. She was a repeat offender who'd simply moved neighborhoods each time. Doris agreed to testify if it ever came to that. She said she was too old to be scared of Karen anymore. Armed with Doris's records, Priya filed a formal complaint with the state's HOA Oversight Division. The state gave the board 30 days to respond with documentation proving the original bylaws were properly ratified. Karen had 30 days to prove something that, according to county records, never actually happened. She didn't know we already had that footnote from the recorder's office. She was walking into a trap she couldn't see. To buy herself time, Karen escalated instead of retreating. She filed a lien against my property for unpaid fines. A lien meant I couldn't sell, refinance, or transfer the farm without settling debts I never legally owed. That was the moment the fight stopped being about a road. It became about protecting everything my family had built. Priya filed an emergency motion to block the lien, citing the road's public status and the HOA's unratified authority. A judge granted a temporary stay, freezing the lien pending review. Karen received the notice by certified mail. Witnesses said she read it standing in her driveway and threw the envelope across her own lawn. That small, petty moment would later resurface, because her neighbor across the street had caught it on a doorbell camera. Twist number 3, that neighbor, Mr. Okafor, had been quietly collecting his own footage of Karen's outbursts for months. He reached out to me directly, saying he was tired of watching good families get chased out of Maple Hollow. His footage showed Karen threatening a landscaping crew, screaming at a Girl Scout selling cookies door to door. Unhinged. We now had documents, testimony and video. The case against Karen was no longer theory. It was evidence. Still, Karen had one card left to play and she played it without hesitation. She went to local media first. She contacted a small news outlet, framing herself as a community protector, fighting an aggressive commercial farmer. A reporter called me for comment. I said only, "Come see the road yourself. Then decide who's lying." The reporter did exactly that. Walked the gravel lane, checked the county map and found Karen's claim collapsed instantly. The story that ran wasn't the one Karen wanted. The headline read, "HOA President's Road Ban Has No Legal Basis." Karen's calm mask cracked publicly for the first time. She posted a furious rebuttal full of legal terms she misused. Legal experts quoted in the follow-up article called her claims a fundamental misunderstanding of municipal versus private authority. Board meetings that once ran smoothly turned chaotic. Residents who'd stayed silent started showing up, angry, informed, unafraid. Harold, emboldened by the public shift, finally admitted at a meeting that Karen had pressured him with fee threats. The room gasped. Karen tried to laugh it off as a misunderstanding, but her voice cracked on the word. I felt something close to relief for the first time in months. The tide was turning, slowly, undeniably. But Karen wasn't finished. Cornered animals don't retreat quietly. They lash out, and she lashed out hard. She filed a restraining order against me, claiming I'd threatened her safety during the last board meeting. It was a lie built on nothing until Mr. Okafor's doorbell footage proved I'd never even raised my voice. The judge dismissed her petition in under 10 minutes, calling it an abuse of the court's time and resources. Twist number 4. The same judge noted Karen's filing pattern resembled prior retaliatory filings from 2 other counties. She had a history the state hadn't caught yet, restraining orders used as weapons against homeowners who challenged her. Priya requested those records immediately. If the pattern held, this wasn't mismanagement anymore. It was a career of fraud. Meanwhile, the State Oversight Division's 30-day deadline arrived. Karen's response landed on Priya's desk that same afternoon. It was thin, 3 pages, no signatures, no original ratification vote. Exactly the gap we'd predicted from the start. Part 3 begins here. The confrontation sharpens. Alliances form and Karen's empire begins to genuinely crumble. The state sent a formal notice. Maple Hollow HOA's governing authority was under active review pending further documentation. Karen called an emergency meeting to clarify misinformation, but attendance nearly doubled. Word had spread fast. She stood at the podium, blazer pressed, binder in hand, but her voice wavered before she even started speaking. "This is a coordinated attack by a disgruntled homeowner," she announced, pointing at me like a courtroom prosecutor. Doris stood up first. Karen did this to my friends the Alvarez family in 2019. I have the emails. Then Harold stood. She threatened me over unpaid dues to force my vote. I have the text messages. Then Mr. Okafor stood, holding up his phone. I have video of her harassing a Girl Scout. Want me to play it? Karen's binder slipped from her hands, papers scattering across the floor like the last of her authority. For the first time, I saw not a tyrant, but a scared, cornered woman realizing her house of cards had collapsed. Still, she rallied, insisting the board would take these concerns under advisement, her signature stalling phrase. But a woman near the back, a newer resident named Sophia Marsh, raised her hand and asked something unexpected. Karen, weren't you removed from your last HOA board in Fairview County for similar allegations? Sophia asked. The room went dead silent. Karen's mouth opened, then closed. She hadn't expected anyone here to know that. Twist number 5, Sophia used to live in Fairview County. She recognized Karen's name the moment she moved in. Sophia had waited months, gathering courage, watching the pattern repeat before finally speaking up in public. Karen denied it flatly, calling it defamatory, but Sophia calmly pulled up an old local news article on her phone. The headline read, Fairview HOA board member resigns amid fraud allegations. The photo matched Karen exactly. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Residents talking over each other. Karen's remaining allies quietly slipping toward the exit. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The truth was finally doing the work I'd spent months preparing for it to do. Priya compiled everything, the unratified bylaws, the extortion of Harold, the false restraining order, the Fairview pattern. We submitted a formal fraud complaint to the county prosecutor's office, alongside the state's ongoing HOA authority review. Karen, sensing the walls closing in, tried one final desperate move. She attempted to dissolve the board and reform it. A clever tactic. Legally speaking, new board, clean slate. No accountability for prior actions. If it had worked. But dissolving a board required a resident vote under the actual bylaws. The same bylaws never properly ratified. She couldn't dissolve what was never legally formed. Every move she made now tightened the noose instead of loosening it. Twist number 6. The towing company that seized my tractor came forward voluntarily after seeing the news coverage. Their dispatcher admitted, on record, that Karen had personally paid a cash expedite fee to skip verification protocols. That single admission connected fabricated violations directly to Karen's personal financial transactions. It was no longer just policy abuse. It was a paper trail of one woman personally profiting from, or at least personally directing, fraudulent enforcement actions. The prosecutor's office opened a formal investigation, requesting HOA financial records going back 3 fiscal years. Karen's accountant, under subpoena, revealed discrepancies nobody on the board had ever questioned before that week. Fine money, thousands of dollars collected from residents like me, had been routed through an account Karen alone controlled. Twist number 7, nearly $40,000 in fines and fees, had never appeared in official HOA budget reports. Karen claimed it was for administrative reserves, but no vote, no resolution, no paperwork supported that explanation. Rosa read the investigator's summary aloud at our kitchen table and Mia asked, "Is she going to jail?" "Dad, I didn't know yet. But I knew the woman who'd tried to erase our family's road wasn't untouchable anymore." Word spread through Maple Hollow like wildfire. Neighbors who'd avoided me now stopped by, apologizing, offering support. Even people who'd once believed Karen's version of events admitted they'd been afraid to question her out loud. Fear, I realized, had been her real weapon all along, not the covenants, not the fines, just fear. Part 4 begins here, the reckoning arrives. The truth detonates and justice finally closes in on Karen Whitfield. The county prosecutor requested a formal hearing to address both the fraud allegations and the HOA's legal standing. Karen arrived at the courthouse in the same pressed blazer, though her composure had visibly thinned over the weeks. Priya laid out the case methodically: unratified bylaws, illegal road bans, a fabricated lien, extortion and diverted funds. Harold testified first, voice shaking but clear. describing exactly how Karen threatened to expose his overdue fees for votes. Then Doris testified about the Alvarez family and the pattern she tracked for 6 quiet, patient years. Then Mr. Okafor played his doorbell footage, Karen screaming at the Girl Scout, at the landscapers, at me. Then Sophia described Fairview County and the judge requested that county's records be entered as supporting evidence. Karen's attorney tried to argue procedural technicalities, but the mountain of independent testimony made denial nearly impossible. Then the tow dispatcher testified about the cash payment and Karen's face went pale under the courtroom lights. Twist number 8. The dispatcher also produced a text message from Karen reading, "Just make it disappear. I'll cover it." That single text, sloppy and careless, tied intent directly to action. It wasn't discretion anymore. It was a confession. Karen's lawyer requested a recess. The judge granted 5 minutes. Karen didn't return calm, she returned defiant. "I built this community," she snapped at the podium. Unprompted. "I protected property values while all of you complained." Nobody in the gallery said a word. The silence was louder than any accusation could have been. The judge, unmoved, asked her directly whether she'd authorized the tow without proper HOA violation documentation. Karen hesitated, then said, "The board has discretionary authority," the same hollow phrase she'd used at every meeting. "There is no board," the judge replied flatly. "Your bylaws were never legally ratified. There never was discretionary authority." That sentence landed like a verdict before the verdict. Karen's entire foundation had just been declared legally non-existent. Twist number 9. Without a legally formed board, every fine, lien and fee Karen had ever collected was void. That meant restitution, not just for me, but for every resident she'd fined over 6 years of false authority. The prosecutor moved forward with fraud and extortion charges, citing the diverted funds and Harold's coerced votes. Karen's own board members, the ones still loyal, quietly resigned on the courthouse steps before the hearing even ended. Deputies approached her after the judge's ruling. She looked genuinely stunned, as if power like hers couldn't actually end. "You're under arrest for fraud and extortion," the deputy said, echoing almost exactly what I'd heard on my own porch months earlier. Cuffs clicked shut around the wrists that had signed every illegal fine, every fabricated violation, every false restraining order. I didn't cheer. I just exhaled, a breath I felt like I'd been holding since that first cruiser blocked my driveway. Karen was let out past the same neighbors she'd once controlled with fear and not one of them looked away. Twist number 10. The final financial audit revealed the missing $40,000 had funded Karen's personal home renovations. New siding, a pool deck, landscaping, all paid for with fines extracted from families just trying to live quietly. That detail made the local news too, and this time the headline read exactly the way it should have from the start. HOA president arrested for fraud after farmers fight for a public road exposes years of abuse. Reporters called for comment. I kept it simple, I just wanted to drive my tractor home. That's all this ever was. The county formally dissolved the illegitimate HOA board, appointing a temporary resident committee to oversee an honest transition. Restitution hearings were scheduled for every resident Karen had wrongfully fined, lien by lien, family by family. Doris got her old lien overturned. Harold got his overdue fees forgiven along with a formal apology. Small justices, finally paid. Sophia helped draft new, properly ratified bylaws, this time with resident votes recorded, notarized and publicly archived. Mr. Okafor's footage became something of local legend, credited by name in the county's official investigative report. My tractor was returned, dents and all, along with a written apology from the towing company's management. I drove it home down that same gravel road, past the same houses, under a sky that finally felt lighter. Mia rode beside me on the tractor step, grinning, asking if we could tell this story at the next farmer's market. Maybe someday, I told her. Right now, I just want to get the corn planted before the rain comes. Rosa met us at the gate, arms crossed, smiling the way she used to before Karen's letters started arriving. You did it, she said. I shook my head. We did it. Doris, Harold, Sophia, Okafor. This wasn't a solo fight. That night, The farm stand had its busiest evening in months. Neighbors came not for vegetables, but to say sorry. Some admitted they'd known something was wrong for years but stayed silent, afraid of becoming Karen's next target. I understood that fear better than anyone. I'd nearly let it win. Back on that porch, before Rosa found me. The Oversight Division later cited our case in new state guidelines, requiring HOAs to publicly file ratification records. PREA called it a landmark, small in scale but wide in impact, protecting families and subdivisions we'd never even visit. Harold, freed from Karen's leverage, ran for the new resident committee and won by a landslide vote. Doris framed the newspaper article and hung it in her hallway, right next to a photo of the Alvarez family. Karen's trial proceeded separately and prosecutors used the accumulated evidence to pursue the maximum charges available under state law. I attended the sentencing, not for satisfaction, but for closure, to see the story finally reach its true ending. The judge cited a sustained, calculated pattern of financial exploitation using a position of unearned civic trust. Karen received several years of probation, restitution obligations exceeding $60,000 and a permanent ban from HOA leadership statewide. She left the courthouse that final day with no board, no title, no laminated covenant book to hide behind. I felt no urge to speak to her. There was nothing left to say that the verdict hadn't already said better. Life in Maple Hollow slowly returned to something ordinary, something quiet, something we hadn't felt in nearly a year. The new committee repaved a pothole near my driveway, not out of obligation, but as a small, sincere gesture. I laughed the first time I saw it. A year ago, that same road was the center of a legal war. Now it was just a road again. The way it always should have been. The way it always legally was. Mia started telling the story at school for a class project titled, "A Time Someone Stood Up for What's Right." Her teacher called it one of the most compelling true stories she'd heard from a student in years. Rosa and I sat in the back of the classroom, holding hands, listening to our daughter narrate our own fight. She ended her presentation with a line I hadn't expected: "My dad didn't win by yelling. He won by writing things down." That line stuck with me more than any court ruling. Patience, evidence and quiet persistence had beaten fear and false power. Doris passed away peacefully the following spring, and at her request, the farmers market donated proceeds to housing advocacy. Harold sent flowers with a card that read, "You gave me the courage I didn't know I still had." Mr. Okafor and I became genuine friends, trading vegetables for his homemade coffee every weekend without fail. Sophia eventually became the new committee's president, elected legitimately, transparently, with every rule properly recorded and voted on. I sometimes drove past Karen's old house, now sold, new owners repainting the fence she'd once fined me over. There was a strange peace in that, watching a house shed its old cruelty like a layer of dust. The cost of the fight lingered, though, months of stress, thousands in legal fees, sleepless nights I can't fully erase. Some things you win and you still carry the weight of the fight long after the victory is declared official. Rosa says that weight is just proof it mattered. Proof we didn't imagine the danger or exaggerate the harm. I think she's right. Justice doesn't erase the scars. It just makes sure the scars weren't given for nothing. These days, my tractor rolls down Maple Hollow Lane every morning. Slow, steady, entirely and finally legal. Neighbors wave now instead of watching from behind curtains, afraid of being seen talking to the difficult farmer. I wave back every time, because a road that once divided a whole neighborhood is what finally brought it together. And every harvest season, I remember that the quietest evidence, kept patiently, can outlast the loudest, most reckless power.